Right, morning, one. Welcome. Friday, the 14th of May. Can you believe it? Half the year is gone almost already. And yeah, the question is, what have you done with it? How have you looked at it? And what have you done with the things that you've looked at? Have you changed your lens? Have you changed your perspective? And how do we do that with the challenges and opportunities and the situations that confront us? That's what we're talking about this morning. So, Ed, this was your topic, but I'm sure we're going to have a great one. But I'm going to kick it across to you to kick off with and see what your lens is this morning.
Yeah, I think I really must learn not to open my mouth because, of course, it interested me. Then I suddenly thought, well, I'm probably going to get asked to say something about it, and I know nothing about what I'm going to say. But what was interesting yesterday, actually, I went on a online course about how to use your mobile phone camera better. And it was amazing how you could, well, one, it was about the technical stuff about just the composition of a picture, how that changed things. But then it was about how you could use various filters and bits and pieces and change the mood of the picture and things. It was quite interesting because you kind of think, well, you click and take a picture, that's a picture. But then you change the light, you change all sorts of stuff, and you can change the impression it gives. And I think we tend to think things are as they are, but they aren't. And how you view them affects how they are. And I thought ages and ages and ages ago, when I was a little chartered accountant, one of my clients, the Union of Communication Workers Insurance Society, had a change in what they did, and they started using postal workers to sell to postal workers. But it meant these guys then had self-employed income, and they were subject to doing a tax return and stuff. And they were worried the guys would get into trouble. So they asked me to teach these people the basics of tax. And I know loads and loads of stuff about tax, and I'm quite happy about talking about tax, but I didn't know my audience. And so the first thing I did was say, look, can I come to one of your training courses, sit in perhaps on a sales course, and then maybe, they used to run them at weekends. I'll stay overnight and chat with the guys in the bar in the evening. And that way I learned that they all thought they were no good at maths, and they were really worried about maths. Anyhow, we had a couple of game of darts, and then a guy gave me a few tips for the horses. And then he told me another guy told me this incredible story about docket. Docket is what they call overtime. And in the post office then, they used to have set duties. And if you finished your duty, you could go home. And a duty was 8 hours work. So you got paid for 8 hours work, no matter how long it took you. And one guy had worked out that there were a couple of duties that they got wrong. And he could do those very quickly. So he could actually do 3 days work in 1 day. And you got basic time for the first one, time and a half for the second one, and double time for the third one. And he could tell me how much he earned that day. So anyhow, long story short, fortunately my session was in the afternoon the following day because I had an awful hangover. And when I came to the session after lunch, which is the worst session you can possibly have because everyone is feeling a bit tired, I opened up by chatting to these guys and said, that was amazing, that game of darts. How did you know that you had to have treble 15, 5 to get to leave yourself double tops? He said, well, it's pretty obvious, isn't it? I said, well, it wasn't for me. I said, it's really lucky that Frank was doing the chalking, which was like scoring. And if you ever try to score at darts, you've got to add up and take away at the same time and work with doubles and trebles and goodness knows what. And then I said, oh yeah, and that story about so-and-so getting all that overtime and stuff and that money he earned, how much was it? And everyone knew exactly how much it was. And I said, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to this afternoon when that final horse comes in on my accumulator. How much am I going to get? And they told me. And I said, oh, and by the way, You know all that stuff we've just been talking about? That's manipulating numbers. Some people call it mathematics, but that's a fancy name for it. It's just manipulating numbers. And from then on, it changed their mindset because they realized they were good with numbers. And I think that is what changing the focus, changing your way of us. It's changing from how you describe things, but it's also changing how you think about things, because we might think about someone about, oh, they can't do that, they can't do this. If we think about what they can do, and Tabiso is a great example. You know, he couldn't afford a recording studio, so he found a windy park, which didn't work. So he found a portable toilet, which kept him out of the wind. What can I do rather than what can't I do? And sometimes when we frame the question, we almost force ourselves down one route to finding the answer. So if we can reframe the question, change the question around to something else, then we open up loads of different possibilities. So I think that's the whole benefit of looking things from a different perspective, through a different lens. And then maybe sometimes we're focusing too hard on something with too narrow a focus. So if we widen it out and use a wide angle lens or whatever, I don't know the technology behind it, you know, we can see the bigger picture. Or perhaps sometimes we're just seeing too much detail. It was interesting in the course, they were looking at how black and white photography tended to give you much more emotion, because some people said it kind of made it clearer because there was less confusion because of all the color. So sometimes actually narrowing your focus down and just looking at black and white rather than all the colors can give you clarity. So I found that really fascinating, that changing just your lens, your focus, your perspective, how you frame something, changes the way you think about it. And I do think a lot of the time we limit ourselves by the way we frame the question. So those are my thoughts on it. And when I picked the subject, I was much more interested in hearing other people's thoughts than my thoughts.
All right, thanks. Yeah, well, I think you done pretty well. So we'll definitely pick up on some of those threads. So Tabiso, what are your thoughts on this particular one?
All right. Today I'm going to talk about, my favorite directors. They're very contrarian, I'll speak about the first, Quentin Tarantino. I like Quentin Tarantino, he makes us see things differently, and he changes perspectives, and he uses this non-linear, story.
Oh, Tabiso, you're breaking up on us, I'm afraid. Yeah, looks like Tabiso is frozen us in the middle of a horror movie. Are you still there?
Yes. So yeah.
Sorry, we lost you. We lost you as you started talking about Quentin Tarantino.
Oh, okay. Can I? All right.
We got as far as non-linear.
Yeah.
Oh, non-linear. Okay. Yes. Quentin Tarantino uses this non-linear storytelling, and his movies usually are spaghetti western, and of course they are characterized by this gory violence, and his movies have this extended dialogues and that reference popular culture, and he's just entertaining. And what I like about Quentin Tarantino movies actually is that his characters are like professionals, so you have like professional killers and professional criminals, bounty hunters. And there was this character, on the movie, what's this movie? Django Unchained. Yes. He's Calvin Candy. Like, I learned to not hate the guy, I understand, because he's like a slaver. He even says it himself, I'm a seasoned slaver. So I had to not hate the guy, So his movies, Quentin Tarantino, are like so great. You know, his movies like Pulp Fiction, they like define a culture, you know, and they also generate this cult following. You know, you have movies like Inglourious Basterds, you know, Kill Bill, Django Unchained, like I said, Reservoir Dogs, Jackie Brown. They define cinema, you know, and you know, on his movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, his latest movie, I like the fact that um, professionals, like I said, you know, the main character is like a professional actor, and like his friend is like a what do you call stunt double? Yes, you know, and he's also like a professional, you know, best friend. So I like that, you know. Quentin is like very creative and he's weird and very awesome, you know. So I like how he goes about implementing his projects, you know. He sees things that other people can't see, and you know, he changes the narratives of things. I'll give you an example again with Inglorious Bastard, you know, he changed the narrative of how Hitler died, you know, and it was so entertaining and it was so awesome, you know. The same thing with Once Upon a Time in Mexico. He changed how Sharon Tate died, you know. He changed the narrative of that. He made it positive, you know. For Quentin Tarantino, factual accuracy is not like really a big deal. His thing is like to create a cinematic experience for the audience, you know, to make it entertaining. So I like that about him. And of course, my favorite, okay, I can't say favorite, you know, one of my favorite directors also, I'll talk about Martin Scorsese. Oh my God, Martin Scorsese is like a god, you know. Man, he's just so great and his movies are like out the ball. You know, he's extremely creative and you know his films usually cover morality, religion, death. Death is like a big thing with Martin Scorsese. And you know, like the human condition, you know, and greed. The main characters of a Martin Scorsese film, rather, you know, um, always tell the story in like the first person, you know, so that the audience can actually connect more, you know, and it is more emotive, you know. I'm talking about films like Taxi Driver, we have Raging Bull, we have Casino, we have Silence, which is like my favorite. Silence is like, wow, it makes you think. It is so challenging, you know, it is so difficult. And of course, we have like The Last Temptation of Christ, you know, that's like, wow. And you know, Trevor actually talked about a Martin Scorsese movie, I think like 2 days ago with the Gangs of New York, which is like outstanding, you know. He also uses like non-linear storytelling, which is like so great. And also movies like The Irishman and Goodfellas. What makes Martin Scorsese so great is that he has the ability to like, you know, freeze time, you know, with his camera techniques. He can literally like slow down time and his storytelling capabilities, you know, how he actually conveys an idea. It is so excellent, you know, like man. No. I have to talk about the Avatar as well, you know.
On that note, it looks like he became an avatar. Uh, frozen again on us, unfortunately.
I'm not there, man. Am I still here?
You're back. Yeah. We lost you just as you started to talk about the avatar.
Yes, the Avatar, and what's with the network today? And I'm so, you know, okay. Okay, I'll talk about one last director, you know, which Francis Ford Coppola, I think he directed Mario Puzo, um, The Godfather, which is like so great as well. You know, The Godfather is like my favorite movie ever. I like The Godfather 1, 2, and 3. They're like so great. They discuss, the mafia, family, and success. It is so great, Um, so challenging, so great, I think before I don't want to freeze again. I think I'll just leave it there for today. So thank you, Ivan.
All right, thanks so much, Tabisa. Right, a quick tour around the Oscars for directors and all their movies. And as said, I've got no idea. I mean, you've watched more movies in your life than I've watched in mine, and I'm almost 3 times your age. So, yeah. So there we go. Jasper, can you better that one? Sure. What's your lens like this morning?
I'm confused. You started off announcing the theme to be almost like take stock of where are we. This the May 14th, or that's what I heard, and my mind started to go around a new lens. Is that it? A new lens. Okay. Then I must again plead the fifth and do a Trevor on you. And yeah, well, I think all of us are constantly busy with adjusting our lenses and just cleaning our lenses. I think sometimes maybe, with stuff happening, you don't know it, but microscopic layers of dirt starts to accumulate on the lens, and you start to struggle to see clearly. And when you can't see clearly, you also start making wrong decisions, which can even worsen a situation than improve a situation. So sometimes it's good just to take stock. And I think take stock is that thing of cleaning the lens, of taking time out to say, all right, this is what happened. This is what I planned, but there's what we say is what you plan and versus what happened. And this yesterday morning was one of those frustrating mornings in my life where it started extremely frustrating. It ended up well, but the frustrating part was going to the Masters Court and being there early to fight the traffic, to get a letter of authority for my late mom's estate. I've done all the paperwork. They said come back 2 weeks later, the letter will be ready. I came back 3 weeks later. To give them some chance. I got there, they're supposed to start working at 8. And by 8:30, still nobody, not a soul in sight, us sitting there waiting. And speaking to people to say, now, what's happening? Oh, no, they're supposed to start at 8, but, we're not sure when they'll come. Now, and you sit there and you eventually start having conversations with the other people sitting there. And yeah, they rock up at about 9 o'clock. I was the first in the queue. They took my number of my mom's ID and stuff. And then about 10 minutes later say, sorry, your mom's stuff is not here. And I said, but can't you look in the system of where is it? Oh no, our system just went down. So, and that hopeless feeling of, I can't fight the system. I can throw all my toys out of the cot, but this one I'm not, right now, this is not going to be solved. And I had to drive all the way back to Johannesburg without having solved what I set out that morning to do. So it felt just like such a waste of time. But fortunately, the rest of the stuff that I did later on made up for it. But I think it's what you plan versus what happened. And I think we all have stories to tell of what I set out to do this year. And now here we are already middle May. And life might have taken us in totally different directions. And it's not necessarily our fault, based on what was on our desks by the end of last year and all the energy we put into those things by the end of last year. Just projecting linearly, it was an obvious thing where that would take us, and then life happens. And how many of us are still busy with the things that were so-called priorities in December? And how many of those priorities have actually panned out or just fizzled out? So when you gave the topic, that's where I was going. So I'll just put it under the heading of the lens to say, all right, I plan versus what happened, and I can only do what I can with what I have on a daily basis and keep plugging away, because you never know. And I've also had incidents in my life where I was plugging away at this, in a certain direction, and then it was interrupted by, for instance, the trip going to Uganda in 1994. That was not planned. It wasn't part of what I was busy preparing for and setting up. It was almost crisis management to just go and tell people, listen, we can't come. And out of that crisis management came the next opportunity. So what I'm saying is life is actually filled with these lucky packet moments. You never know what life is going to deal you on that day while you are still sorting out crises. So so I'd say clean your lens and do what you can with what's in front of you.
Right, thanks, Jasper. All right, so Ed is cleaning his lenses. But I don't know if that's a good idea when you're looking at the people on the screen. Ed, you might probably want them to be completely misted over. Yeah. I don't know if Trevor is with us in spirit or body, or just simply virtually, perhaps there. There he goes. There we go. So Trevor, I think you need a new laptop. Never mind a lens.
Yeah, I talk about frustrating morning. It took me about 25 minutes to reboot this laptop here. But that's only because I've got the 75 watt browser Windows and it wouldn't take another one. They're just, I don't know, these things aren't built to actually take my driving of them. Right, so what's your topic?
A new lens. Yeah, how do we look?
All right, new lens. In fact, I caught Thabiso talking about Quentin Tarantino, how he creates a new narrative. And I found that quite interesting because I've been thinking lately that there's an old mate of yours, what was his name? Dwyer, who actually turned around and said, Ivan, what did he say? If you believe it, you'll see it. Talk to me about that one again.
You're talking about Wayne Dyer's
Wayne
quote,
Dyer, that's it.
Yeah, if you want the things you look at to change, then you need to change the way you look at things.
Yeah, so I've been, you don't watch the news at all. So I do, just to make certain that we've all got a helicopter view and understand when the asteroid's going to hit us and knock us out like the dinosaurs.
Did you check the Mayan calendar for today?
No, what happened?
Well, it ended. The world ended 9 years ago, so I wouldn't worry about the news.
Well, that's why my blooming laptop crashed here. So now I understand what's going on. But I catch snippets of the Zondo Commission inquiry into corruption here. I see what's happening in Israel and Palestine, and. I listened to Thabiso, a youngster, and I think the world has actually bought into Wayne Dyer's book. I think everyone now is creating their own narrative, and they couldn't give a stuff for anyone else in the main. And I think people are writing their own books as to how they want to live. I mean, we're a classic example of Trump and his followers and the way they saw the universe in terms of their narrative. And now I listen to the other side of that, Joe Biden and his group of people and how they see the world through their eyes. And I'm afraid, you know what? I don't want to see through politicians' eyes. I don't want to see these blooming idiots that are lobbing bombs at each other across from Israel to Palestine and back. People are dying, for goodness sake, all for the want of some other idiot's narrative. I mean, get your act together. Go and I just caught that you put a link there, Dewitt Jones. You know, do yourselves a favor, all of you blooming monkeys who are presidents and leaders and all that sort of codswallop, and you want to take over the world and do all this sort of nonsense. If what you are doing is killing other people, stealing their money, and doing all of that sort of thing, man, I'd love you to go and visit a lumberjack in Canada and shove one of those big redwood trees, are they in Canada or in America, right where they can stop all this blooming nonsense that you're spewing out in the world. Go and click on that link, Dewitt Jones, and see how positive people can make a positive difference in the world. And I think that's the only narrative that I actually want to live. So I'm annoyed because my laptop attacked me for the last 25 minutes. But I do believe what is going on here is, you know, I'm sitting, last night I was out looking at the stars, and I heard these blooming cars coming across, you know, these things that sort of go at the back. These guys were clearly having sometime about 3:30 in the morning, were lining up for an illegal race. And you could hear the race actually taking off. I haven't been out there to have a look at it, but I heard all sorts of snot and trana on the go. And this is a time here in South Africa when people are concerned about the third wave actually coming in. We listen to what's happening in India, and people are turning around and saying how much they're struggling, but these people are burning more fuel than SAA does in half an hour, just dicing up and down the road and having an absolute ball. On what money? If you work damn hard for your money, do you actually go and throw it down things like this? The narratives that they are living. I'm sure Quentin Tarantino is writing our global narrative at the moment. So Thabiso, I'll bring that all back to you. So what was the topic again? What are the lenses that you actually look through?
No, yeah, Trevor, you've got to look at these guys racing around in the early mornings of the early hours of the morning and say, well, they're having a great time. You know, I mean, that's a new lens. Just take a different perspective on it. I mean, it's
yeah, but you know, what is the perspective that people are living in? Are we living in a fantasy world or in a real world? And those people who are living in a fantasy world that are burning all the millions, or they're burning their own millions, or they're burning other people's millions, do they actually care that Ed cares about climate and the leaving of plastic bumpers on the road when they knock down the lampposts? I don't think they do. So Ed accused me of being a cynic. No, I just think there are 8 billion people out in the world, and I think I will just sit at home and discuss things with my favorite cat here, one of the 3 that walks across my laptop.
All right, so Ed wants to pick you up on that, so let's go.
Are people living in a real world or in a fantasy world?
I was just interested in why, you know, a bunch of guys want to race some muscle cars in Trevor's backyard is wrong, but a bunch of billionaires want to race some rockets into space is right.
Depends on the lens you're using to look at it all. So, all right. So yeah, well, lenses. You know, I mean, I love lenses. And I think what happens with a lot of people is they tend to look at the world through a fixed lens and they never change it. And you know, anything that doesn't fit into that frame of reference and that view doesn't belong or doesn't even exist in some instances. So I think changing your lens, putting on a new lens every now and again is a critical part of life and business. So yeah, I did a little presentation a month or so ago on the Chamber thing about business through the eyes of a photographer. So I spoke a bit about lenses and things there, and you know, you can go, as Ed mentioned, a couple of them. You can go from fisheyes to wide angles to macros to primes to telephotos to zooms. You know, all sorts of different kinds of lenses, which give you all sorts of different perspectives on the subject that you're actually focusing on. And when you've got a cat trying to replace your moustache with its tail under your nose, you probably need to take a different view on allowing the cat onto your desk. But yeah, so lenses I think are very interesting things because the more you magnify a subject, the smaller your depth of field gets, which means you see less of what's actually in front of and behind that subject. And the wider your angle of view comes with your lens, the more you see, but there's less detail. And I think those are two very, very important things when you're coming to look at life and business, because you need both. You need all the views, but certainly you need to have that wide angle view. You need to be able to see the big picture. You need to be able to see what's in the distance. You need to be able to see what's in the middle distance, and excuse me, and be able to see what's relatively close to you. But then you've got to take a different lens, and you've got to start looking at elements within that scope that you've got there. So you can put on a long lens, a telephoto or a zoom, and you can zoom out to what people like Quentin Tarantino and Trevor Noah love to say, the last frame. So you start with the last frame of the movie or the goal or the mission, whatever it happens to be. So you get that last frame, and then you start to work backwards from there, and you build up the story in reverse. And by doing that, you then shorten the lens and bring back in that view until you get down to the macro lens. And I've always wondered why we call it a macro lens and not a micro lens, because macro in many respects means big, but in photography terms it means making little things big. So I suppose that's where it comes from. So macro lens allows you to focus on minute detail. And some of the photographs that I've taken with my macro lenses, I've actually calculated that my depth of field is in fractions of a millimeter. So to get focus, focus at that level is extremely difficult. So you need an extremely steady hand. You need great lighting. You need persistence. You need patience. And I think that's what happens when you're trying to build a business, build a life. You need to get down to that level and then build it back up again. So it's a forward and backward exercise in terms of actually structuring a system that's really going to work. And I think for me that's what different lenses are all about. But if you want to listen to some fantastic stories and really inspiring stuff, the two Dewitt Jones links that I put into the chat earlier are great things to watch. Dewitt was a National Geographic photographer for his entire life, his entire professional life. He then became a speaker and a trainer, and used his knowledge and experience of great photography to actually inspire and motivate business people. So Trevor and I have watched that celebrate what's right with the world more than a few times over the last 20 years, and it's a stunning video to actually watch. So that's my little bit of input on a new lens, yeah. So thoughts for a topic for Monday, Ed? Are you going to jump in?
I was going to ask you, is your presentation available anyway? Because that sounds really fascinating. I never thought about that depth of field thing before,
Jasper has I think put it up on the Chamber YouTube channel. Jasper, if I'm not mistaken, it's there. We can have a quick look at it. I was actually looking for my actual presentation when we started this session this morning, and for some reason I couldn't find it. But
I'll send you the link, a YouTube link, and then you can share it with the group on Monday.
Good stuff. All right. Yeah. So in fact, here we go. So there we go. Let me get that link quickly. Pop it in the chat. There you go. All right. So topic for Monday. Anybody?
How about using your passion or your hobby or your pastime as a metaphor for business, like you did with your photography? Perhaps Tabiso could use music, Trevor could use sport, Jasper could use whatever Jasper uses. I can just dip out because I haven't foggiest idea what I'd use.
Well, when you're a recovering accountant, you've got all sorts of challenges you've got to sort out.
But I think we all must have some sort of hobby, passion, pastime that we could use as a metaphor for how to go in business, like you did with your photography.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, like you do with your trail running. So yeah, you have got something. So good. All right.
Yeah. Excuse me for next week. I'm away for next week, so I'll only follow in the following.
Didn't see any leave forms. So yeah. You got to submit your leave forms semi-soon, otherwise.
It's in the South African Post Office mail.
Yeah, well, one of these days I'll share with you my stories with the Master of the High Court as well. And anyway, we won't go down that road at the moment. Good, fantastic. So, passions and hobbies as metaphors for business for Monday. Great stuff. Otherwise, we're back on at 9 o'clock with 4A's Chamber. We're back on at 11 o'clock with your partnerships. So busy morning ahead of us, and look forward to seeing you then. Otherwise, have a great one. Cheers.